Hi, I'm Louise Kennett, and I'm going to be talking through a presentation today around thinking about behaviour differently, a more positive approach for behaviour. We're going to take a look today about understanding behaviour repertoires for children, and then kind of trying to start to think about why challenging behaviour happens in the first place, and also then, well, how do we identify where or when to intervene so that we can make a difference? So how and why do we develop behaviours? Well, as humans, we learn from our environment from the very first moment we come into the world, and even before. There's research to show that fetuses can hear and learn sounds of their caregivers' voices and so on from even in utero. And then as soon as we kind of are born into the world, we start to develop an understanding of the fact that our behaviours can have effects, and that we can actually create some control in our world and in our environment by the types of behaviours that we do. So there are biological components which control the acquisition of behaviours. So for example, humans innately will learn how to blink, will learn how to swallow, will learn to cry out in pain, for example. Which is different to other animals. So some animals are actually born and they can walk already, but humans actually follow a very specific developmental pathway, and some of our behaviours are linked to that developmental pathway, and others actually we can acquire or not depending on our environment. So we learn about that effect that we have. You know, a baby learns very quickly. If I cry, if I exhibit that behaviour of crying, very quickly I'll either be given comfort, or I'll be given food, or I'll be more comfortable in some way, maybe kind of having nappies changed and so on. And so what starts as a very biological behaviour, where a baby needs to get that adult human to give them what they need, quickly can become what's called a learnt behaviour. So maybe when they're not quite so hungry, but they fancy a little bit of attention, they might kind of start to cry and start to do those behaviours which they've learnt has produced an effect in the past. Some behaviours are needed for a very short time, and some stay with us forever. So, again, taking that example of a baby, the behaviour of screaming every time we're hungry tends to abate as we grow older. Sometimes that is translated into other more sophisticated behaviours, like searching out for food ourselves, asking an adult for something to eat, seeking out help to get food. Very rarely do you see a grown adult crying or screaming to communicate that they want something to eat, just like a baby does. So some behaviours were only needed for a short time until we can develop them into other behaviours, sometimes more appropriate ones, whereas other behaviours do stay with us forever. For walking, for example. So as soon as we learn walking, we tend to be able to walk, for the rest of our lives. Some behaviours take a very short time to learn, and others much longer. The behaviour of patience, waiting for things, that can be a really tricky skill, very tricky behaviour to learn. Whereas other behaviours we can learn very, very quickly. We can, especially once humans develop speech, once we can talk, it's very easy a lot of the time for us to learn a new word. As long as somebody shows us, tells us, kind of lets us know we've done it right, we tend to be able to add new words to our vocabulary very quickly, and takes a very short time to learn. So our learned behaviours come together to form what's called a repertoire of behaviour. And this is kind of a collection of all the different behaviours we've either learnt directly. As humans, we're very good at learning through observation as well. We can have a good go at things that maybe we've even just seen. And we can call on these behaviours in different situations. So, for example, way back in my repertoire of behaviour, I would just about have enough knowledge about maybe how to hold a hockey stick from my secondary school PE lessons, that if someone was to come to me today and say, right, we've got to play a hockey game and your job depends on it, I could probably just about manage to hold the stick around the right way. I could probably understand, okay, I've got to look like I'm running around, chasing a ball. I know I've got to get it into a goal at one end. I probably couldn't tell you much more than that. However, I could call on my repertoire behaviour of then social skills of, okay, just copy what somebody else is doing. Maybe a repertoire behaviours of how to get through tricky situations where, just get through the game and look like you're kind of engaging as best as you can to be able to fulfill the requirements. Humans are social beings, so our behaviour is naturally influenced by others or society. Humans way back when would gather in groups. We would take our cues really from what the other humans were doing in the group, and we would do the same. There's always the joke, isn't there? The British love a queue, and if you see somebody queuing, we might just join that queue. They must be waiting for something, and we don't want to miss out. So we do get influenced a lot of the time by those around us. When you go on holiday somewhere foreign, you can kind of pick up, this is the right way to behave in this situation. This isn't. And our behaviour is influenced a lot of the time by wanting to fit in, wanting to be part of a society. So, I always remember kind of a family holidays in France where, for some reason, for respect, they would have a rule that you couldn't wear shorts or vest tops into a church. Now, I can absolutely appreciate that and why that would be so, but it's not a rule that we have necessarily here in the UK. So you very quickly learn by the reaction of other people that something isn't right here. And then someone might point out the sign. I remember my dad then frantically kind of trying to get changed into trousers. And so all of our behaviour we learn for ourselves, but we also learn how to apply that behaviour in different situations to understand which are the right situations to do this behaviour in. Just because I can sing a song doesn't mean I should sing a song in this particular situation. And if it's me, I definitely shouldn't sing a song anywhere. So think of your behavioural repertoire as a book. Okay, so you're born with the covers of your book and it grows as you do, adding in chapters and pages to that book. So I have, for example, the Book of Louise. I have those covers, and every single thing in my life has added a page into that book. Okay, where I've learnt a new behaviour, and sometimes it's filed under chapters on academia. Might be in a chapter on behaviour, could be a chapter on Harry Potter. There's a big chapter in my book on those things. Dancing, music, but the kinds of music that I like. I wouldn't be able to talk very eloquently on a subject which isn't in my behavioural repertoire. If someone was to try and have a conversation with me about astrophysics, I've got nothing. I've got nothing I could probably draw on other than maybe talking about some kind of star constellations. If someone was to try and ask me about politics, I might have a very weak knowledge there of some kind of, in terms of facts and behaviour around politics and be able to talk about that. However, it wouldn't be a particularly strong chapter of mine to use. In terms of what we typically think about behaviour in terms of challenging behaviour, we all have chapters on avoiding things, getting out of doing stuff we don't want to do. Whether that as an adult looks like ignoring a text message, not answering a phone call from maybe a family member or a particularly draining friend, we all have those things. Oh, I'm not going to go there because then they're going to see me and then I'm going to get caught into that situation. So we avoid things all the time as adults. As children, that might look in a classroom very much like I can get out of stuff by looking like I'm sharpening my pencil for the 20th time, keep going to the bathroom. All of those behaviours as children, we learn quite quickly, this can work out in a good way for me. And we start to add different things into those pages and chapters. So think about the children that you work with. What chapters or pages have they got? What behaviours do they know how to do really well? So it could be that they have a huge amount of knowledge and lots of behaviours around Minecraft, Pokemon, the latest Little Mix kind of songs. They've also got a pretty good chapter on how to get out of class, how to actually get a reaction from their classmates maybe. Sometimes some aggressive behaviours. They've got a big chapter on all different types of aggressive behaviours. Use this one in this situation, use this one if it's not so bad, and so on. Unfortunately, for a lot of our children, they might also have chapters on how to stop adults asking questions, when we're talking about safeguarding concerns as well. Some of our children have been through an awful lot and a lot of trauma. And so for some of our children, their books will be dominated by those chapters and pages around behaviours around that trauma and what to rely on. And the chapters that they might go to in a situation might not be the most logical kind of link that you might think of, but for them, that is their go-to. That is in their behaviour repertoire, and it's a really strong behaviour for them. And sometimes if we don't use a skill in our behavioural repertoire, it might fade away, it might disappear completely. Sometimes it's strong enough, like that hockey example I gave, that you could call on it when it was needed necessarily, but other ones, they've just gone. So if I kind of learnt the flute when I was younger, if I haven't ever picked up a flute in 20 years, I might be able to get a sound out of it at this point. I might be able to even get a few notes. It's going to be faded. However, the behaviour of me doing the splits has gone. That's gone. That's not in my repertoire anymore at all. I couldn't do it probably even a little bit at this point. So some behaviours, they just kind of fade away and come out of our behavioural repertoire. They're not part of it anymore. And other times, they're just really, really faded. So for some of our children, the behavioural repertoire might not support things like working or writing. Their writing chapter might be really quite weak. They see that as hard, they see that as difficult. They haven't got much to draw on. So I don't know if anyone's seen the film Inside Out, the Disney Pixar film. That was a great one to almost show this. It's that, when you try and call on a behaviour in your repertoire, if it's not that strong, it might crumble away. And you might have to try and rely on a different chapter in your book, because as humans, we've got to behave, right? We need to behave in the world. Our teacher is there. They've given us a worksheet. My writing chapter isn't that strong. Maybe my reading chapter isn't that strong. But do you know what? I've got a really good chapter on how to get out of this difficult stuff. So I'm going to start flicking the pencil. I'm going to start ripping up the page. I'm going to start running out of class. I'm going to stare out the window. So if they can't use a behaviour that they need in a given situation, you might find that people start drawing on other ones. And it's exactly the same as what we do as adults. We'll start drawing on, okay, I can do this because I know how to behave in this social situation. I might not know exactly what I'm doing, but I know enough from a different type of skill for me just to blend in and just get through this. And sometimes that's the attitude that our children have all the way through the school day. They find it all quite difficult. They haven't got the skills there to draw on strongly enough in their behavioural repertoire, so they'll start relying on other, maybe not so appropriate behaviours. So which parts of their book do they rely on using the most currently? And that's a really key thing to try and look out for. They are doing something. They are doing a behaviour. It might not be the one you want, but they're filling up their days picking a behaviour out of their repertoire. So if they're spending 80% of their day outside of class, then that's the part of their book or their repertoire that they are relying on the most. So have they got alternatives in there? Have we taught them? Has anyone ever taught them, okay, you find this difficult, let's add into your chapter on how to get out of doing things which are difficult, a strategy to ask for help, a strategy of managing that, a strategy of how to cope with doing that hard thing. So take a minute, pause the video, have a think about which chapters need strengthening. And it may be that you also think about yourself at this point and think, actually, I need to work on strengthening my tolerance levels, my patience. I need to work on actually the afternoon I find really tricky because the noise levels go up. So actually I need to do something in terms of strengthening your behaviour in response as well. So what makes a behaviour strong? So we know that we create these behaviours, we learn them, we gather them, we've got them in this repertoire. But what necessarily makes a behaviour stand out as being one which is strong to use or is very bright on the pages, if you like, in terms of that metaphor of a book? So behaviours are strengthened by the response that happens immediately afterwards. And they're strengthened by events which are reinforcing. Now, that doesn't mean they have to look like they're reinforcing to you. It has to look like they're reinforcing to the person who is behaving. Okay? And behaviours will actively avoid aversive situations. So when you think about things being reinforcing, you probably think, oh, okay, if I do something good as a behaviour, if I make a good choice, I'll get a sticker, say, and that should be reinforcing. The sticker should mean that the behaviour goes up and is strengthened. Yes, in an ideal world, that's exactly what would happen. However, if a child is finding something difficult and they go sharpen their pencil for half an hour, then and they realise then the lesson's over, they haven't had to do the work, then actually the sharpening the pencil and wasting half an hour of lesson time has been reinforcing. And the behaviour of, the behaviour of avoiding that work is going to be stronger for that child. So actually what ends up being reinforcing is not the fact that they didn't get a sticker. It's the fact they actually got out of doing what they were finding difficult. Their behaviour has worked for them. And we're not all reinforced by the same things. Just because lots of children like stickers, for example, doesn't mean that that child is going to like stickers. If you've been giving them stickers or trying to give them stickers for a year and their behaviour hasn't changed to get those stickers, then you can probably conclude that the stickers aren't very reinforcing to them. Okay? And behaviours will actively avoid aversive situations. We can spot them coming a mile off. We can spot the person knocking on your door that's going to talk to you for half an hour about gas prices and switching your plans. And sometimes we actively avoid that. We're like, I don't want to put myself in that situation. That is aversive to me. I don't like that. So I'm not going to answer the door. I see that PPI number flashing on my phone. I'm not going to answer that. I find that aversive. I'm not going to go to that dinner party because those kind of social situations are not comfortable for me. So I'm going to actively avoid and say that I'm sick. We all do it. We all avoid aversive situations at some point. And children are exactly the same. But we don't want them to be. So often adults will kind of get very offended that our children are finding our lessons aversive. Like, we've put a lot of time into this, a lot of effort. How could this possibly be an aversive situation? This is fun. But it's kind of like, you can't force somebody to have fun. You can't force somebody to enjoy something. So if they're trying to avoid it, they are finding it aversive. So we've got to find a way of addressing that. We can't just keep going thinking they'll at some point realise this is really super fun. Something is going wrong there. So behaviours respond to reinforcing events dependent on their history with similar events. So we all know people who maybe don't like putting themselves in learning situations, don't like putting themselves in kind of maybe a presenting mode because their history with similar events hasn't been great. That in the past hasn't been good for me. So, for example, me with sports. I'm not about to put myself in a situation where I might have to do sports because I haven't got a great history with it. My PE teachers were pretty explicit with how poor my skills were. So I don't have any history of being successful with sports. at times now where I play some sports with my children, I do actually think, actually, I just hit that. That was good. So I'll put myself in that situation where I'm playing with my children and I'm kind of doing things with them. But it's very unlikely that at the moment I would ever put myself in a situation where it was kind of adults v adults, because that kind of event doesn't hold any reinforcement for me. I've got no history with that. Now, it only takes one time to kind of correct that. But as adults, we have autonomy as to what we choose to spend our time doing. Children don't have that freedom. They're very much, their lives are dependent on what we as the adults think is going to be reinforcing. So we either need to change the child's history, change the child's experience of those events to make them slightly less aversive, more reinforcing, slightly less aversive, slightly more reinforcing, until we get to the point where they've actually got this good history of reinforcement. Now, for a person to actually use one of their behaviours, they need to have some kind of motivation. And it can be very small and subtle, but we do need motivation of some kind. And it can be tricky to identify what is actually reinforcing to an individual person. So we can do something called motivation mapping. So this child here, he likes drawing, running away from class, and the iPad. Okay, now if we just look at those three, that's very limiting. And actually, I would say that those three is this child's motivation sources. They're motivated to run away from class, they're motivated by drawing, and they're motivated by iPad or computers. But there's several different reinforcers that we can actually draw out of these motivation areas. So for example, out of drawing, we could create a special frame or a drawing folder to increase the use of that motivation by giving a specific reinforcer. That there's a frame that the child could put their latest picture that they're proud of in, or a folder they can take home between home and school. We could give them different art mediums to draw with. For running away from class, we could actually try and reinforce them with running or chase games. Where is he running to? This is often something where we get so consumed with the fact they're running away from class, and that is wrong, and we need to correct that we actually don't take much notice about where they're going. Because if we took notice about where they end up, we might get an idea about which reinforcer that they might actually benefit from. So they might always run to the IT suite. They might always run to the office where they can see people coming and going because they're waiting for mum maybe. They might always run to a quiet space in the school. They might always run to their sister's class. Maybe break tokens is a reinforcer that we could draw out of this motivation to run away from class. So sometimes we need to see the inappropriate behaviour that we want to change as actually maybe that's what's motivating them. You know, the actual running away from class. So how could we use that? Then we've got the iPad and computers. Okay, we could use time as a reinforcer, time on the computer, and have increments of time that they work for. Particular apps. So rather than just give them free rein on the iPad, it could be that this good choice leads to access to this app. But actually this better app, we need to see some more good choices for example. We need to embed the iPad or computers in learning maybe, so that it's not always a carrot on the end of a stick for children, like you do this, then you get iPad or computers. They might actually engage better if it was actually on the computer to start with. Maybe printing rights. So lots of places, you know, it's very strict on what you can print, what you can't print. But actually, if their behaviour choices were linked to actually getting some more of those printing rights, that might be really, really reinforcing. Now, once you've done a motivation map, now for children, you might have a physical motivation coming off of here. You can draw lots of things off, water, sensory things, however, whatever it is. and, use all the people around a child, because then you're going to get the most creative ideas in terms of what you could draw out of these. There could be lots of other ideas. And then the strongest reinforcers will come when you cross these motivation bubbles. So if a child loves drawing and they love the iPad or computers, then maybe there's a reinforcer in the middle here about, okay, would he be super motivated then to engage in some YouTube tutorials on how to draw certain things? So to try and cross the bubbles is always going to be giving you a stronger reinforcer to use. So, for example, I might be motivated by music, I might be motivated by friends and family, I might be motivated by food. Now, you cross all three together, and my friend suggests that we go out for a really nice dinner and then go to a concert. I'm there. That's super reinforcing to me. I've crossed all three of those motivation bubbles. So why does behaviour happen? We know we get it, we know how it strengthens, but why? So a behaviour of hello, something has to happen before a behaviour. Something has to tell us the right behaviour in this situation is to say hello. And this could be a million different things. It could be the phone ringing and you pick it up. Hello. It could be seeing somebody and they've said hello. Hello. But something normally starts off a behaviour. And then something happens after it. So if I walk down the street and I say hello to 5 people on the way and nothing happens afterwards, I'm probably not going to say hello to the 6th person maybe. Whereas if I say hello to 5 people and all 5 people say hello back with a smile, and that's reinforcing to me, then what's going to happen after I've said hello is they're going to say it back and smile, and I'm going to feel good. So that's likely to strengthen up my behaviour of saying hello when I see somebody walking on the street. Second behaviour, I'm going to the shop tomorrow. Now, again, something is going to happen before I do the behaviour of saying I'm going to the shop tomorrow. It's not going to be the same as the first example, though. If I just walked past somebody in the street and said, I'm going to the shop tomorrow, they might actually think, okay, I didn't ask that. This is a bit strange. Okay, so you can imagine how many millions of different subtleties there are in our language that controls our behaviour. So I might only say the behaviour of I'm going to the shop tomorrow if what's happened before it is somebody explicitly asking me, what are you doing tomorrow? Or when are you going to the shops? Or I need some bananas, could you get some for me? And then someone might say, I'm going to the shop tomorrow. And again, something would happen after a behaviour. So we get this 3-step model of a behaviour. We get something that happens before it, we get the behaviour itself, and then we get the consequence, what happens immediately after that behaviour. And remember, it's what happens after a behaviour which strengthens it or weakens it. Like, this is worth doing again, or this is not worth doing again. So even if the event that's happened before a behaviour were to happen, we still might not do that behaviour if it hasn't been reinforced in the past. So here's some behaviours here. You stink. Pushes a child over. So we're not saying anything on this one. And please leave me alone. Now, looking at those 3 behaviours, you would imagine that the one that we want our children to do is the last one. Yeah, I think please leave me alone sounds pretty nice. Depends how you say it, obviously, but it certainly looks better than you stink or someone pushing a child over. So what happens before the you stink? Well, in this case, they see someone they don't know how to talk to. So this child is just going to reply, you stink, panic. Panic, anxiety, I don't know how to talk to this person, therefore it's probably best if they go away. And the child runs away. So in this scenario, our child who said you stink thinking, great, that worked brilliantly. I didn't know what to do when that child came over, and now they've gone away. Perfect. Another child has a football that the child wants, so they push them over. They get the football and they run off to play with it. Job done. It's worked. So because they got the football, they run off to play with it. They wanted the football in the first place. The behaviour of pushing a child over to get that outcome is probably going to happen again. Then we've got please leave me alone. So how about if this was elicited by, they see someone who's been bullying them. They say, please leave me alone. And the bully makes fun of them and hurts them. That's a horrible example. However, you can see that that behaviour of please leave me alone has not been effective. It's not done what they wanted it to do as a behaviour, because they wanted it to be, they've seen someone who's been bullying them, they've said please leave me alone, and it's not worked. So then that child is less likely to say that again. And it's a really tricky one, the behaviour kind of arena around bullying, because you can imagine if this was a child who's come to you and said, I'm being bullied, as adults we might have said to them, you need to say, please leave me alone. And they're doing what they're being told, but it's not being effective. That's where, especially around bullying, adults have to step in more, because it's unlikely the child is going to be able to do very much to get the response that they need. They need some backup here. They need the actual kind of observation of others to be able to say, they said leave them alone and they said it nicely, you need to leave now. So in this scenario, the child is likely to start to develop other behaviours which are better at avoiding those situations. So running away themselves maybe, or they might actually use some aggressive behaviours themselves, like this isn't working, speaking to them, so I'm going to start pushing back, I'm going to start kind of reacting to actually make this stop. So if we look at that behaviour cycle then, we cannot coerce someone to use a different behaviour. So say we want a child to use a different behaviour. What can we do? Because we can't get inside of them and make them do something different. So we have two places where we can make changes to affect the likelihood that the behaviour we're looking for can occur. So we can try and control what happens before a behaviour. And those strategies are known as antecedent strategies. So what happens before? So for example, like in the previous slide, where we were saying, okay, they see a child that they don't know how to talk to. What we can do is we can try and teach them how to react in that situation in like a social skills group, a nurture group, for example. We can set up some role-playing type situations to help the child if we can see that happening. And put in a strategy beforehand. So in the example of the ball, if we notice that the child wants the ball all the time, they keep pushing children over for it, an antecedent strategy might be to provide, 20 balls at playtime, so there's plenty of balls to start with. We still want to tackle the behaviour, we don't push children over when we want something, but as an antecedent strategy to try and control the behaviour, we could put something in place like that, where we make it just ineffective, it's just not needed because there's plenty of balls available. And then we can try and control what happens after a behaviour, and those strategies are called consequent strategies. So we can intervene before or after, but we can't actually force anyone to do anything in the middle. So our consequent strategies can normally focus around trying to find a reinforcer. We've done that motivation mapping exercise where we try and identify something that child will want more than the behaviour they're already doing, and try to use that to show them that actually make a better choice and you'll have access to something you like. Now, we don't want to set up a situation, okay, well, if you don't do something that's the right choice, we don't want anything horrible to happen. That doesn't really get great results. We just want it to be that, okay, those extra good things just aren't going to happen in that respect. We don't want anything bad necessarily to happen, because that doesn't actually have any research behind it of being really super effective, but we can definitely kind of look to see, okay, how many good things do you actually get during the day? Now, these good things are actually only available for good choices. We don't want to set up the situation, though, where we expect perfection from children. And the minute we set up a system like a smiley face chart or a sticker chart or something like that, sometimes there's this idea that the child has to be absolutely perfect to get that smiley face. Or, and there's other children in the class who aren't on a smiley face chart or a sticker chart or anything like that, but actually they're calling out occasionally. They might be wasting time sharpening pencils occasionally. We're not looking for perfection here. Okay, and so we have to be realistic. But consequent strategies do play a major part, because that is the strongest part of the behaviour cycle. And then we have to ask ourselves, is it easier to control our own behaviour or to control the behaviour of someone else? Now, I don't know what you guys are thinking listening, but I can tell you that I find it much easier to control my behaviour than to control somebody else's. Because as I've already said, you cannot make somebody behave a certain way. So actually, what can we do in a situation? You can't control the fact that a child has run out of your class, unfortunately. You could try locking the door. That is illegal and not effective. And actually, you can't do that all the time. So it's not possible. So what can we do? Well, we can control our reaction afterwards. We can step back and try to identify, okay, where's he going to? How long is he going to be there? Is he in any danger? What kind of safeguards do I need to put in place here? And actually, what benefits are there to them coming back? If they're running away from you, or running away from the classroom more likely, why should they come back? What is waiting for them back in that classroom? Is it extra work that they've missed when they've run out of class? Because I'm not sure they'd want to come back for that. Are all their good stuff in that classroom? Does enough good stuff for them, enough good experiences happen for them in that room to make them want to be in that room more? So we've got to try and unpick, okay, this is rubbish situation. I want my pupils to be inside my classroom, obviously. That is much easier. Having a child run out of class, for example, is really problematic, because you need to sometimes lose a member of staff to observe them. It can cause quite a lot of chaos. But we do actually, if we want to stop it happening all the time, we do need to try and unpick, why is it happening in the first place? And actually writing down, a little diary, what time, what lesson, is it before or after lunch? Is it always on a Monday? And then actually we can control our own behaviour. Okay, so Mondays are really tricky. So actually Mondays are going to look like the easiest day for them. It's going to look super reinforcing, because we can control that. And sometimes we can be a bit reluctant to change our own behaviour as the adults. Because why should we? That's the attitude, that we sometimes can get stuck in. It's like, actually, this is working for 29 children. Okay, I've got one child who it's not working for, so why should I change anything that's happening for the whole class? Well, you don't have to, but why not? Because, okay, if 29 children are responding well to what you're currently doing, 30 children, including the one you're struggling to reach, might react really well to how you're going to change things. So just because you're doing something reinforcing for one child doesn't have to be they're getting this and no one else does. Why doesn't everyone have a fun Monday for a few weeks? And then those 29 who don't really need that level of reinforcement to keep doing what they're doing, you can gradually fade that back out, So sometimes we can be reluctant because we feel like it's a judgment on, I'm not doing something right. If you're saying I need to change what I'm doing, that means that what I'm doing is wrong. And that's a horrible thing to think about ourselves. We all want to do a really great job. We all go into the profession to do our very best and to get the best outcomes. So if something's not going quite right, we can blame ourselves and feel really awful. But actually, sometimes we need to realise that it's nothing personal. It's just behaviour. And actually, it's easier to change our own behaviour. And that's why we should do it. And are we expecting different results when we're doing the same thing over and over again? So, if we keep doing the same thing and we keep getting the same results, nothing is actually going to change, because the behaviour is reacting to something, and so it will just keep reacting that way until something changes. So which behaviours particularly challenge? Lots of these behaviours will always challenge in a big classroom. Pinching, teasing, calling out, biting, irrelevant answers, throwing things, ripping up work, swinging on chairs. But all of these kind of come down to the big three, really. They're either irritating or annoying, they're dangerous, or they're disruptive. Now, your irritating and annoying behaviours will go on a bit of a kind of up and down, depending on how tired you are, how much work you've got on, how stressed you are, how annoying the actual behaviours are, and so on. So what one person finds irritating or annoying, another person might not. Dangerous behaviours, again, these are really challenging, but normally because everyone would react kind of the same. We don't want children getting hurt. Nobody wants children getting hurt. So we will react to this. However, again, we will react to this differently depending on the type of dangerous behaviour. So, for example, hitting. If a child is kind of like tapping more than hitting, that is very different to a punch to the face, So we'll always react differently depending on how dangerous we feel a certain situation is. Swinging on their chair, I know lots of professionals who absolutely not, because they've got a history of seeing a child crack their head open or seeing, injuries of that kind. Whereas some people are like, oh, okay, just stop swinging on your chair. It's more in the irritating or annoying section than the dangerous. And then you've got the disruptive behaviours, which can cross over into irritating or annoying. But ones like running away from class, for example, that's not just irritating or annoying, that's disruptive, because that causes a bigger amount of chaos. Ripping up work, it's always going to be disruptive because other children, will react to that as well. And it tends to be part of an escalation of behaviours. So where's our focus? So, okay, we're dealing with this challenging behaviour, and that's where our attention is focused, because it elicits aversive biological reactions for us, and by that, it's like things in your body that you don't like. So it will increase your heart rate, your breathing rate, your stress levels, your cortisol levels, your adrenaline levels. As soon as a child runs out of class, your adrenaline goes up. Oh my goodness, where are they going? If they're doing something dangerous, again, your adrenaline will come up. And so our attention is completely focused on getting it to stop. And it's therefore easy for us to feel that this challenging behaviour is happening all the time. So when I speak to people, they're like, yes, this is happening all day, every day. It's very rare to have a behaviour which happens literally 6 hours straight during a day. They almost always have a break for lunch. But it feels like that, and it genuinely does, because it feels like it's consuming all of your thoughts, every single lesson. But actually, if we do have capacity to have somebody come in, or for us to step back for even half an hour and try to just monitor, it's not happening for the whole half hour, but it happens for the last 10 minutes of every lesson, because that's when they've just had enough, maybe. And because it happens at the end, we tarnish the whole lesson with that, or if it happens right at the end of the day, it's easy to make it feel in our heads like it's happened all day, but actually it's because at the end of the day we're the most tired, we've got big headache or so on, and it feels worse than maybe it is in reality. There is power in the data. It can make you feel more in control, more powerful, more informed to take some easy data on when this is happening, which days, what time, what's happening at the time. It feels laborious, and I do get that sometimes you need to pull back in order to figure out the issue. If something was going on medically, you would go to the doctor, and the first thing they would do is take some data. They'd take your temperature, they'd take maybe listen to your heart, your blood pressure, and then if they couldn't figure out easily what to do, they would send you for more data collection to a specialist, for a scan, for an x-ray. So we wouldn't expect a doctor to prescribe us medication without knowing from the data that that's the right thing to do. And it's the same with behaviour. So identify those kind of key parameters really around the behaviour. How long is it happening for? How much? Could you think of a scenario that would 100% predict that a challenging incident would occur? So if you were to say, okay, if I was to put big money on the fact that this will happen, it would be on a Monday morning in maths if Johnny was sitting next to him, for example. Okay, and if you could 100% predict, then you could actually start to unpick that situation in terms of our antecedent strategies, what could happen before a behaviour, what could we do as a consequent strategy to try and get what we want in the middle in terms of their behaviour. Because if we can predict, then we've got some data, some information to work with in terms of changing things to create a different situation. Could you think of a scenario that would 100% predict that it wouldn't happen? So even if that is only lunchtime, oh yeah, lunchtime is great. He loves eating, he's so hungry. Okay, if he's so hungry, could we ask parents for 2 other smaller lunches so we could break the day up into 4 so he could kind of be working toward those smaller lunches as well as his lunch? What is it about the lunchtime then? Is it just the food, or is it the no demand? Is it the person he sits next to? What about that scenario supports the fact that he's not doing these behaviours, or she? And what do we actually want them to do instead? So, okay, if they are doing it for 6 hours a day, what do we want them to do? So if at the moment they're running around and they're ripping up stuff, you want them to go from that to what? What is the next acceptable thing? To then say, okay, I want them to go from 6 hours of doing nothing to 6 hours of doing 5 different lessons a day, probably a little unrealistic. So where's our first goal going to be? What's our first lesson we want them to engage in? Is it a maths lesson, or is it an art lesson? Is it kind of a lesson on the computer, or is it a taught group lesson? And do they have the skills to be able to do that as well? Do they have those skills to do that goal in their behavioural repertoire already, or do we actually need to teach them still? And that's what we're good at, teaching. So very often when I look at a situation where there's lots of challenging behaviour going on, they can do that behaviour. They've got that down. They're doing it all the time. But the behaviour I want them to do, I've got to teach it. I've got to explicitly teach something that I don't have to teach 29 other children in the class. But I do have to teach it to this one child. So why does the challenging behaviour happen? In terms of challenging behaviour, we don't often want to do things which are not socially acceptable. So why do we do it? There is a historical perspective of putting the issue, so when something is going wrong, within the person, creating this language of good or bad people. So, way back when in medieval times, it was believed that we had like 5 fluids that made up the body. And if they were out of balance, that could mean that people acted a certain way. So they would do things like draining the blood or putting leeches on people. And then kind of we had a movement where people believed that people were possessed. And so if they were behaving badly, they were possessed, they were demonized. And again, the problem was inside the person. And although thankfully we don't have that kind of thinking a lot of the time anymore, we do still have this language of you're being good, you're being bad, and it puts the problem inside them, like you are this. And that can be really damaging because as humans, we hang on to our personality from a quite young age. Whatever people tell us we are, we are. It becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if I'm constantly told, like, you struggle with this, you struggle to stay in the classroom, you're not being very good, you need to be good today, all the child is doing some of the time is living up to, their label. I'm the child who can't cope with this. Sometimes you can be having a great day with a pupil. They're having a great day, they're making tons of good choices. And sometimes you could think, I don't know what happened there. I literally had told him, you're doing so well today. You're being so kind to people, for that child to then hit the person next to them. And you think, where did that come from? Well, sometimes it comes from the fact of, hang on a minute, I'm not good. I'm not kind to people. I'm the child who hurts people and lash out. So this good or bad kind of perspective can have quite severe consequences in terms of creating a situation where a child believes this is just who I am. This is how I behave. So it's much more useful to see behaviour as choices. So it's more empowering to feel that it's not you that's at fault, but something you can actually control. So, when someone says, am I being bad? Am I being good? It's like, you're not bad. You're a great person, but you're struggling to make the right choices today. So when we say about goals, we might talk about them in kind of the language of choices. So we could say, I'm looking for some good choices today. And in maths, that looks like sitting at your table. It looks like answering a few questions. It looks like trying the worksheet, even if it's just one question. Those are the choices I'm looking for. And if we make the right choices, there's going to be some good things. If we don't make the right choices, we don't get extra good things. That's just the way the world works. But talking about choices allows the child to feel that actually they're in some degree of control. You're not making the right choice right now. The choice you need to make is, because sometimes when children are struggling, we might say, you need to behave, you need to be good. And even if we say you need to make good choices, the child might not know what that is. And we sometimes almost make them guess, like, you need to be better behaved this afternoon. And they kind of like nod at you because they know that's the right thing to do. But maybe they've not got a clue what that actually looks like. So sometimes using a script when we're reacting to behaviour, which tells them all the answers that they need. So I can see that you're struggling right now and that you've run out of the classroom. That's not the best choice. The choice you need to make right now is to give them some fixed choices that are available and that you're happy with. If we make those choices, these are the good things that are available. How can I help you? I'm here to help you make the right choice. Sometimes with younger children, we can tell them how we could help. So if they're struggling with their emotions, we can say, I can see you're super angry because you're clenching your fists. I'm here to help you, and I'd really like to see some good choices of walking with me back to class. I can hold your hand and we can talk about Pokemon on the way. So we're allowing that empathy to come in, as well as giving those fixed boundaries and fixed choices around the right thing we want to see. And if they hold our hand and start walking with us, yeah, I'm happy to talk about Pokemon, because then I'm actually reinforcing the behaviour I want, some compliance, and actually walking back to class. And then before I even get back into the classroom, I might be saying, okay, we're going to head back into class. Now, are you able to tell me what you were struggling with in class before so I can try and help you? Or would you like to sit outside the classroom a minute and I'll go grab your work to work out here till the end of the lesson? So again, fixed choices to empower them to feel like there's something they can do to control. There's something they can do to feel like they're making a positive step forwards. We react automatically with our behaviour all the time from the environment, and children do exactly the same if they haven't had repeated, rewarded practice. So if they have always run out of class when something's been difficult, they will always run out of class when they find something difficult until they've had repeated, rewarded practice. Okay? And so it could be that they have to do that walkthrough every lesson for a couple of minutes at the beginning. Could be they could do that with a peer. It doesn't have to be with an adult, to talk them through, okay, this is what's going to happen in this lesson. This is what the choices need to look like at playtime. Okay, and then after playtime, if we've made the right choices, this is what's available for you. There are 4 reasons that we can boil this down to as to why we exhibit behaviour, including challenging behaviour. So sensory, because it feels good. We take a bubble bath for no other reason sometimes other than the fact of the way it makes us feel. Escape. So sometimes we exhibit behaviour to avoid social situations or demands. And this can be in appropriate ways and challenging ways. So as adults, we learn a lot more appropriate ways to avoid social situations than inappropriate. For attention. So any reaction from another person that feels good to the person. And there are so many different ways these days to get attention. Likes on Facebook, this whole culture of the amount of likes you get on a photo on Instagram or social media gives that person attention. So some people will go about getting attention in ways which we feel are inappropriate because it's really strong for humans. That human contact is kind of innate to us, of another human valuing us, putting us higher in their social structure, being an alpha of the group. That attention is really key for a lot of behaviours. Intangibles, access to things that people want. So again, that child who pushed someone over to get the ball, they did that because they wanted the ball. They wanted that tangible thing. The child who kind of said, reacted to the person they didn't know how to talk to and saying, you stink, they managed to escape that social situation. And we can all think of desirable behaviours we do to meet these needs and undesirable behaviours, of the way in which we get some of this feedback as adults. So how about the pupil we may be struggling with? Why could they be displaying their behaviours at challenge? Does it just feel good? The child who's getting bullied, does it feel good to them to have called somebody else a name? It makes them feel that kind of feeling inside, like control. Is it to escape things? Is it for attention? We all know it doesn't have to be positive attention. It could be negative attention. Or is it to get things that they want? Is it because they know if they kick off, they get the iPad, they get the book they like, those kinds of things. So first steps then, observe, record. Watch them, step back, try to unpick a situation. Prioritise. If you're struggling with 4 or 5 different types of behaviours in terms of challenge, you can't tackle them often all at once. You've got to pick one and unpick it, decide what you're going to teach the child, record it, start to change things that happen before the behaviour, after the behaviour, and get some results on one behaviour. And sometimes you'll then get what's called a waterfall effect, where you'll intervene on one behaviour and then you'll actually see a positive effect kind of without even having to tackle the other behaviours at all. Define a goal. Identify what you need to teach. Think about representing the instruction or the antecedent. How else could we ask the child this? How else could we present this task or this situation to them? Manipulate the environment. Are they struggling to come in from playtime? Well, what are they coming into? Can they do something on the way? If they're a child who loves a job, they love taking something to the office. Well, okay, towards the end of playtime, maybe you could get them to do that to get them in the building. Give them a message, take to the office, and then playtime's finished. By the time they got to the office, they'd either be hanging about in the corridor, which is easier than trying to get them in off the playground. And then someone could meet them in the corridor and then transfer them to something else that they don't mind quite so much before transferring into the classroom. So we've manipulated the environment to try and get them closer and closer and closer to where we eventually want them. Where are the rewards coming from? Are you in control of them? If they're running out and able to go straight into the IT room and jump straight on a computer and access the internet on their favourite game, you're not in control of those reinforcers, those rewards. So when they go out to play, could the IT room be locked? Could the computers be unavailable? Could his login be suspended at will? Because you have to be in control of them to be able to deliver them for the right choices. Are they the right ones? Have you identified the right thing that is going to get them going? So go back to those motivation maps, try and pull new and novel things out of their motivations to try and use. Are they the right amount or the right type? So just because they like Minecraft doesn't mean they're going to like a Minecraft colouring sheet, for example. They're like, this is not what I'm into. I don't even like holding a pencil. So there's no point you offering me Minecraft colouring page. But if you were saying to them, okay, you can watch 2 minutes of a Minecraft, guide through video on YouTube, that might really be reinforcing for them. So what can we do differently? Capitalise on the things that a pupil does well. What do we want more of? So when we've looked at that day and we've broken down what kinds of behaviours they are doing, how can we capitalise and show them that was amazing? That's what we want more of. What do we actually need to teach? I keep coming back to this because we don't want to forget it. We need to actually teach them what they are missing from their behavioural repertoire. Are we focusing on the absence of a behaviour rather than more of what we need? So by this, we're talking about the fact that, okay, they're not writing. They never do any writing. So we're focusing on what's not happening rather than, okay, I actually need them to be holding pencils, paintbrushes, chalks more. I need them to be strengthening up their hands. I need them to be strengthening up their fingers. They're not going to go from not wanting to write at all to writing. There's got to be a bridge in between. How can we change the way we present a task? How can we change the attention we're giving to them? Are we being that explicit, where we're telling them exactly what we're looking for, or are we trying to make them guess? Are we being consistent, which is so difficult? It's one of the most difficult things. But children learn really quickly not to trust adults, because adults are great when there's a shiny new chart and there's a shiny new pack of stickers. But how about after week 2, when the stickers have kind of run out or nobody can find them and we've forgotten we're doing that? And often this is the point where people will say to me, oh yeah, we did a sticker chart, it didn't work because he's doing it again. Like, okay, were you doing it consistently though? Because it might have worked for the first 2 weeks because you were doing it consistently, and then because we lost the chart or normal things happened in life which meant we didn't continue it, that's why we're seeing the behaviour resurface. And are we being objective? Are we getting so intolerant because it pushes our buttons that actually we're not being very objective about this behaviour? It's getting to us and it's causing us a lot of stress. Therefore, we're not able to take that step back and break down what we actually need to do to change. We just kind of keep coming back to the fact that it's an actual problem. Do our most difficult pupils trust us? Have we built up that relationship with them? Or every time they see us, are we the ones that actually are doling out the consequences. We're the ones linked to that hard stuff, the hard learning. And can we be what they are struggling to be? So, if they're struggling to be calm, can we show them that calm? Or actually, when they're not calm, we're not calm because we're running after them and shouting and maybe kind of flapping around them. Are we actually able to show them that we can stay calm? Because often, again, humans will match each other. If you start speaking louder, the other person will start speaking louder. If one person is upset, they don't really want the other person to be upset and kind of shouty as well, because then they're like, okay, I need to be more upset because not only am I out of control and I'm 8, this adult looks out of control and upset, so there must be something to be upset about. Whereas if we can control our emotions and be what they are struggling with, then they could end up coming down to match us. And they'll be like, okay, this person is in control. We're reacting with those fixed choices and giving them the behaviours that they need and teaching them what they're missing. And so we can start that process of slowly transferring the fact that we have to scaffold that for them first, to then them choosing to do that when they're experiencing that emotion or that situation in the first place. So just because we behave doesn't mean we understand behaviour. As humans, we all behave. We all maybe have experience of children, grandchildren, friends' children, pupils. And so we expect ourselves to be able to be experts on behaviour. And everyone has an opinion, which sometimes can be just super confusing. But everybody has unique experiences. So you can't understand everybody's behaviour, because unless you've lived their life up until that point, you're not sure how they could react. So everyone brings those unique experiences and unique learning history of behaviour to every single day that they're involved in. Consider other explanations. So you might have decided, because somebody else has said, that they're behaving this way because, I don't know, mum and dad maybe are separating at home. But okay, we can't control that. That's happening, unfortunately. We can try and support the child. We can try to be empathetic, give them time to talk. But what about if there's something else going on? Don't just dismiss the fact there could be other explanations to unpick here, rather than just that trauma that they're going through at home, which obviously is going to play a big part, but consider other explanations as well. Keep searching. Keep searching for explanations, keep searching for extra reinforcers and motivations, to actually get the results we need. We can't ever give up. Sometimes it's good to alter one thing at a time. So that, if you're a very systematic person, sometimes it can be helpful to change just one thing at a time and see what results we get. Be realistic. Don't go in all guns blazing, vowing to be consistent on 30 different things. Be realistic about your expectations of yourself as the teacher, but also be realistic of what the child is able to do as well. Be aware of behavioural fatigue. We all know from the recent pandemic about behavioural fatigue now. It's been in the news a lot, where, you get strong compliance to start with. So in the lockdown, for example, strong compliance from everybody, doing something very difficult and very unnatural for humans, of staying indoors, staying away from people. And then over time, you get this behavioural fatigue. It doesn't matter too much if I'm a bit close to people. I don't want to stay in my house all the time. And so you start to get this kind of loosening of the rules that we do for ourselves. So when children start trying to change their behaviour, that's why you often do get a week or two of like, this is amazing. And then you get a slump because you get that behavioural fatigue. And we as the adults start easing off on all the strategies. So we think it's working, and we forget to put them back in when we see that sharp uprise, because we actually need to get on top of that behaviour again to show the children that those boundaries are still in place. There's no magic, I'm afraid, but what there is systematic change to environments that alter behaviour. So just think how much your behaviour can shift from a meeting room presentation to relaxing in your living room maybe 5 minutes later after work. So just that change to environments alters behaviour. Meeting room to home, we act completely differently. You wouldn't lay on the sofa. You wouldn't lay around in your meeting room the same way as you would on your sofa. So when we do change environment to support better behaviour, we can see that shift occur for children as well. Try and empathise. It can be really difficult if you're at the end of a really long week, but put yourself in the frame of mind where you can remember what it's like to get something wrong or to struggle. It's not easy for you or for them. So make sure you're kind to yourself. If you are struggling with challenging behaviour all day at work, you want to make sure that you've got something to look forward to for yourself as well. And you can only do your best. Managing challenging behaviour is hard. It's hard because it's hard, someone once said to me, and I think that is the most useful thing I think I've heard, because sometimes we can beat ourselves up about the fact that this is hard, I don't know what to do, I should know what to do. Sometimes it's just hard, and that's okay. Take time to reset and realise your limits, and just approach the next day, maybe just changing one thing so you can feel like, okay, I tried that today. Okay, it didn't work. Let's try a different thing tomorrow. Sometimes you've got to stick with things, got to ride it out, so be kind to yourself and just take that step back and try and unpick a situation rather than just assume you've hit the nail on the head the first time. Like, well, he obviously ran out of the room because it was maths. Try and unpick that a little bit further if it keeps happening, to give you more things that you could potentially alter to try and get a more positive effect. Thank you ever so much for listening, and I hope to see you again on another presentation in the future.